What's going on?
There we go. Chris Biderman of the Sacramento Bee joins us. Chris, thanks so much for joining us. And look, I got a text, Chris. I was not gonna bring this up, but I got a text that, I've joked with you before, or the inside joke is that I've only known you since you've been engaged. So I joked with you about being engaged for a very long time, but you've been engaged for an appropriate amount of time. I've just only known you as an engaged man, and that is ending soon as you're getting married, what, next week or so?
Yeah, a week from Saturday officially. We're
Okay.
in yeah, it's coming up close.
So, okay, not to get too far in the weeds, but location, are you traveling? Where's the wedding? Where's the honeymoon?
The wedding will be in Midtown Sacramento at an
Okay.
undisclosed
Oh, yes.
location. Um, but yeah, we're really excited about it. I think there might even be some listeners who are involved and or coming to the wedding and or the after party. So it's going to be a great time, but I'm gonna refrain from making too many details public.
Okay.
But I am. We're really excited. We're in the home stretch, and we're super excited. It's gonna be a fun time.
Can I get honeymoon or no?
Honeymoon. We're going to Costa Rica.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about here. That is what we're talking about here, Chris. That is going to be outstanding. I've heard great things about Costa Rica, so we'll have to link up at the one of the media dinners and chat about it once you get back. Okay.
Sure.
Enough is I had to pay it off, Chris. I'll tell you who texts me after we get off here, but Chris Biederman, Sacramento Bee, joins us. Engaged, about to be wed. And with that being said, Chris, it looks like the Kings might be trying to divorce from each other with how poorly they've been playing. Before we get into how we got here, is there any part of you, we dove into this a little bit, right? And I know what we saw wasn't great, but they didn't get enough time. Is there any part of you, even just a small part, that thinks, I mean, they did get really unlucky with their health? Any part of you that feels like that?
Yeah, I guess to a certain extent, but I think when you're planning a season or when you're looking at a season and a stretch run, you always have to account for that. I
Mhm.
think a smart way to build a team and the smart mindset to have is to always assume that there's gonna be attrition during a season, and that can our roster withstand an injury here, an injury there, and still get to where we want to go. I think that has to be part of the calculus because no one ever plays 82 games. Even Domantas Sabonis, one of the most durable players in the league the last few years, has missed time. I think you just have to account for that. And so for the Kings specifically, in the decision making process to fire Mike Brown and trade De'Aaron Fox for Zach LaVine, I think part of the calculus had to be, man, how difficult is it going to be to make the playoffs or make the play-in while going through all these drastic organizational changes? I think that has to be part of the calculus. And I think we're seeing how difficult it can be when you do go through all those drastic changes while also trying to compete down the stretch run, get to the playoffs. And I think that's got to be part of the argument for deciding, like, hey, if you're going to make all these drastic decisions, tear it down to the studs, make sure you keep your draft pick,
Mhm.
accumulate as many assets as you can going forward. So then you're in a position to be where, say, the Oklahoma City Thunder are, with all of their assets that they've accumulated over the years, knowing that, look, they won 22 and 24 games in Mark Dagnall's first two seasons in 2001 and 2002, with the understanding that, like, it's going to take patience, it's going to take time. The Kings have gone another direction and said, we're going to try to remake this on the fly. And I
Mhm.
think with that comes the difficulties that we've seen them deal with.
Talking to Chris Biederman of the Sacramento Bee. Well, and real quick, Chris, we were trying to figure out what other teams have even done something like that, right? The Lakers, that Luka move, that's still more so for the future. What they attempted, the double trouble of the coach and De'Aaron Fox, that's nuts, right? So it's not even really something that we've seen before.
Yeah, I would agree. I got off the top of my head, I don't know. I
We
don't
talked
really
about the
know.
Nets, but that whole thing was kind of Elmer glued together anyway. It doesn't
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah, and I think too that, like, I understand that there were 16 years of not going to the playoffs, and I understand that there's the context of history and just getting to the playoffs is a big win. I understand that line of thinking. But the other side of it is the long-term cost. It's like, you didn't have to necessarily trade De'Aaron Fox. And if they do end up moving on from Monty McNair, Wes Wilcox is already gone. If you do end up moving on from Monty McNair in the offseason, you would have let Monty McNair make one of the biggest trades in recent franchise history
Right.
without seeing it through, when you could have just shut De'Aaron Fox down, make sure you kept your draft pick, and then allowed, if you're bringing in a new GM, the new GM to make that deal. And then you have some sort of continuity, because you're going to have a GM now that's inheriting a situation that they might not have wanted, or you're going to make the GM search much more difficult because it's a scenario where GM didn't get to make that trade. The GM is coming into a situation where they might be locked into Zach LaVine over the next few years on that contract and saying, man, we don't have a lot of assets to work with. And the best asset we had, De'Aaron Fox, is already out the door.
Talking to Chris Biderman of the Sacramento Bee. Chris, let's get out of the deep weeds for a second and just look at the dandelions. Would you, at this point, change the lineup? Right? I thought it was too late. I don't know, almost a month ago to change the lineup. I don't want to tick off Malik Monk, anything like that, just for a couple more minutes of Keon. And I just don't think this team is very good. Would you make any lineup changes? And what do you think? I'm not asking for source information here, but what do you think the level of power Doug Christie has to make a change like that?
Yeah, and this is just me speculating, to be clear. Like, I think Doug is more or less in survival mode and trying to do what he can to keep his job. And I think that's a really delicate balance, because you do have DeMar DeRozan, who commands a lot of oxygen within the offense. He has more pedigree than anybody else on the roster. He's probably the only future Hall of Famer you have on the roster. I mean, maybe that's another discussion. Maybe Domantas Sabonis gets it. But like, he has equity of one of the best scorers in league history, full stop. And Doug Christie is in the awkward position of saying, man, would it be better if we go a defensive route and have Jake LaRavia playing wing defense and rebounding and doing all the hustle things that maybe DeMar DeRozan doesn't do necessarily? Does that open more shots for Keegan Murray? And we saw what that looked like a little bit last night, albeit in the one game sample. Would the Kings be better off being more of a versatile two-way team if DeMar DeRozan's on the bench? You're moving the ball more, you're playing better defense, you're maybe opening up better looks for Zach LaVine. Is that a way to go? Or if you're Doug Christie, do you say, man, ownership loves DeMar DeRozan. DeMar DeRozan is the most accomplished guy in the room. How can I justify benching him while also trying to endear myself to ownership in order to keep the job next year? I think that's a really difficult place to be. And I think that's the calculus that's going through Doug Christie's mind. And I think the difficulty of that decision is manifesting itself on the court, in the sense that the Kings are losing games. And that's not to say DeMar DeRozan, I'm not trying to criticize DeMar DeRozan and not say he hasn't been great, and particularly at scoring in the fourth quarter. But DeMar DeRozan, I think, is best utilized when you have athleticism and defense and rim protection around him. And really, when you look at this Kings roster, all of their best and most important players have the same deficiencies. And that's, they're not great passers. Aside from Sabonis, they don't really have a lot of connectors. They don't have a lot of defense. They don't have a lot of rim protection, or really any rim protection outside of Jonas Valanciunas. And so that's how you end up in this spot. Yeah.
Talking to Chris Biderman of the Sacramento Bee. Chris, last one before we get you out of here and get you ready for your big day. Who at this point at 12-11 on March 26th, to Chris Biderman, if you were the GM, who is untouchable to you on this Kings roster?
Man, I don't know if anybody's untouchable.
Yeah.
I honestly don't. Like, if you look at what the conversation was last summer, it was, Keegan Murray's untouchable for Lauri Markkanen, and then this season happens. Do you feel the same way about Keegan Murray? And like, I understand it probably hasn't been ideal circumstances for Keegan, given you add DeMar DeRozan. He's not, the offense isn't anything like it was during Keegan's rookie year. But like, if Keegan Murray is in the way of you getting a potential upgrade or a potential all-star caliber player, I think you have to seriously think about it. And from the other side is like, if you're Keegan Murray, are you dying to sign a long-term extension with the Kings and tie your future to this organization that's been one of the most stable or unstable in the entire NBA over the last decade plus, right? Like, so, if you're Keegan Murray, you might welcome a change of scenery. And from that standpoint, if you're the Kings, you're like, all right, well, if Keegan doesn't want to be here long term, then he can't be untouchable, right?
Yeah.
So they've put themselves in a really difficult spot. And man, like, if not for the Dallas Mavericks trading Luka Doncic, I think the Kings would be looking at like the Mavericks have saved the Kings from being really the worst situation in the NBA over the last few months, because the Kings looked like a couple years ago with Beam Team 1 like an ascending team, a team that was finally going to have stability, and now they seem as dysfunctional as they've ever been, and they're going to go through another offseason of massive change potentially, and that ultimately just seems to be a revolving door of instability, and then it manifests itself in not making the playoffs.
Chris Biderman, thank you so much for joining us of the Sacramento Bee. Probably the next time I'll talk to you, you might be on the other side with me, brother. Well, I'll welcome you early. Chris, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon.
No problem. Hit me up for the info on the after party.
I will. Sounds good, man.
All right, Alan.